everybody. Welcome. Really happy to have you here with us. I am Anna Bryce, the VP of Programming here at the AMA Phoenix, and we're so happy that you are joining us. And we are thrilled to have Dave Maddox here with us today from WestGroup Research. Before we get started, I just would like to thank our sponsors. As always, we really thank them for being with us as a sponsor. They make all of this happen. They're very supportive of us and we thank them. I would particularly like to point out Taylor Wellman from Financial Potion, who is our host for all of our webinars. If you ever have a need in video, please consider giving Taylor a call, and you could always reach out to me and I can give you her contact information. And I would also like to thank WestGroup Research for being a long-term sponsor. It's been years and years, at least as long as I've been here and even longer. They've been so supportive of us over many years, and we really thank them for being a sponsor. And we would lastly like to thank our supporters, which are the companies that employ our board members, because without them, we just wouldn't have these hardworking board members that we have without the support of their companies. So we thank you. And I would just like to get straight into introducing our speaker. We are thrilled to have Dave Maddox with us today from WestGroup Research. He is a professional who has more than 30 years experience in research, marketing, and advertising. As Vice President and Senior Analyst at WestGroup Research, Dave provides a variety of consulting and research guidance to a wide variety of clients, industries, and also advertising and PR agencies. So without further ado, and I'll let Dave talk even more about what he does, but I would like to welcome Dave. Thank you, Dave, for joining us. We appreciate it, and we are really looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you, Ann and Taylor, and everybody else. Welcome. I see some familiar faces among the crowd there from a long time ago, actually. So I'm happy to do this. Always happy to help out AMA whatever we can. We've always tried to provide. We've over the years, Stephanie and others have been much more intimately involved with the organization as on the board, as president. I myself have never really gone that far. I guess I'm a little lazier, but I try to contribute where we can, either in terms of back in the day when we made reminder calls about meetings from our phone center to making our facility available to the board for the meetings. And I'm glad we can help out. I think the bulk of what we're going to talk through here is going to take about 30 minutes, probably at the most. And then that'll leave us plenty of time for discussions. But the topic, we're doing a lot of pivoting these days, and we have been for about a year now. In this case, we're pivoting to online qualitative research. The basics of that meaning, what can we do? What can we as professionals do? And we specifically as a research company do to accomplish some of the research that we're not able to do now, frankly. And we'll talk about what's possible, what works, what doesn't, and also some of the bright side of everything. Can't let the opportunity go without doing a little bit of a sales job on WestGroup. We are Arizona's oldest and largest market research firm. Been around a very long time, since 1959. We actually had our 60th anniversary a few years ago. We consider ourselves an all-in partner. So we work very closely with pretty much every major company and agency, certainly in the Arizona Phoenix market. We're a full service company, so we've got soup to nuts as far as quantitative, qualitative, everything. And we also have national and international reach. All of us have done some clients, including just about anywhere you can name on the globe and in just about any language. So We do a little more than a lot of people think we do. A couple of specific things, and hopefully everybody can see all of this. So some of the more common things that we do take care of for clients are brand research and tracking. A lot of customer experience, customer satisfaction. NPS is a big one that we do a lot of work with. Journey mapping, which is primarily a qualitative, but also involves quantitative elements. I personally work with a lot of agencies on ad concept and product testing, and that's something that we still continue to do, employee engagement. We don't do a whole lot of political things, but we do a lot of public affairs things, as I would say. So citizens and voter and stakeholder research, a lot of times that would be for state agencies, ADHS, Clean Elections Commission, things like that we do work with. We've got everything in-house for the most part. We do all of our own consulting and study design, usually. We do offer out our other services like the facility and the phone center on occasion, just for clients who only need that particular service. We have all kinds of sampling availabilities. We have panel companies, we have different telephone samples, which we still do, which are primarily cell phones these days. And then we also will sample in person. So, for example, before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of intercept work for different clients. That all got put on hold for a while, obviously. The data collection services that we offer, again, just a little bit of everything: phone, web, text. We still have clients that do good old-fashioned mail surveys. In fact, a number of them. And then on the qualitative side, we also obviously do groups, individual interviews, and different mystery shopping and analytic stuff. And then we try to report where we can. Usually, I know that my preference with all my clients is whenever I do a proposal, certainly a full service proposal, I build in either an in-person or, in this case, an online presentation of the findings. I'm of the mind that if I'm there to share the results with them and answer questions, then there's less chance that there will be any confusion about what the answers really are. I want to quickly, though, say, because I know that we had Kathy DeBoer, our colleague, back in October, went through some research slides and gave you a lot of information, mainly on quantitative research. And I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. Qualitative versus quantitative, they're not necessarily exclusive. Most studies have elements of a little bit of both. So for example, even a tracking study, a big sample of an online or phone survey, it might have qualitative questions in it, like why did you decide to purchase X product, or why did you not, or why did you provide a low rating on an NPS scale. But for the most part, you can kind of take, most projects have one or the other that they kind of lean towards. And what we're talking about today are qualitative. So the differences are quantitative is primarily a numbers-driven exercise. Qualitative is more opinions, experiences, and the why behind how the behaviors are happening, or the opinions. Usually qualitative involves a smaller group or sample, either in terms of a series of focus groups, a series of one-on-one interviews, that type of thing. Whereas quantitative would be 200 to 250 to 300 people minimum. Generally, qualitative takes the form of focus groups and interviews, as I mentioned. The purpose of qualitative is typically exploratory, or in some way you're trying to learn why or what's behind the attitudes and behaviors or the preferences of the people that are providing you their feedback. And it usually is focused mainly on open-ended questions. There are usually some rating scales involved, but that's not the primary purpose. So we're talking about qualitative today. And to be honest, what we're really talking about primarily are good old focus groups, which we all miss. So the four areas that I've sort of divided this into, excuse me, I got a little Charlie horse here. That's not the same as having a hoarse throat, is it? Sorry about that. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about where things stand on the transition or return to actually being able to do in person, and what are some of the barriers that we're running into right now. And some of those specifically will focus on facility and recruiting issues, and online qualitative options. So we'll go through some of the possibilities, the things that are available to you, either through us or through other means. And then I'll try and give you some idea of tools to be able to choose which one works better for you. Uh, it's very easy for people in our industry to sort of, I don't want to say fixate, that might be a little excessive, but to sort of lean one way or the other, like every problem can be solved with a focus group or every problem can be solved with a survey. And that's not the right way. We can certainly help you, guide you in that respect. But what my goal is to help those of you who are not researchers, or those who are, but mainly for you to be either able to either help your organization or your clients make smart decisions on what can be done right now, what can't really be done realistically, and what needs to happen for them to learn what they need to learn. So the first thing we want to talk about is returning to normal. And I took these photos and I said, where is everybody? Those of you who have been to our facility would recognize some of this. We actually were pretty fortunate. As a company, we have always embraced remote work. We've been doing that for many, many years. So that particular transition for us was not that difficult. And then on the other bright side is in the summer of 2019, our space at 44th Street and Thomas area, our lease was running out. We had a lot of open offices that sat there empty most of the time. And so we made a conscious decision to cut back on our space. We went from 7,000 down to about 3,500. So we almost cut the space in half and retained it as a meeting space and focus group facility. Added a real nice kitchen, which has been nice. And we got to use it for about 6 months before everything kind of came to a halt. But it's a nice new facility. And if anybody, when the time comes, anybody wants to see it, please let me know and I'd love to give you a tour. So when can we go back? So basically, these are my, some of this is fact, some of it is just my kind of observation or opinion. From what we've seen, I would say there are probably not going to be clear guidelines. Everything changes daily. You see it now with changing advice on vaccinations, changing advice on masks, and so on like that. Nobody really knows, and I think anybody that tells you is blowing smoke a little bit. We just don't know when that date certain will be. Our guess, our best case scenario is that we hope to be doing in-person groups or of at least smaller size, hopefully by June or July. But if we don't make it, it would not surprise me. The biggest thing that we have to worry about is participant safety and client safety, and obviously staff safety. We don't want to be the ones who bring people in and then get to be on the news that night or have us on the news saying our client's name. We don't want that to happen. And that's the selfish reason, but we also just obviously want to take care of people. I know that we're going to have mitigation in the foreseeable future. And by that, we mean we're going to have masks, we're going to have sanitizer. Many of the things in our facility will be different even when we get back to being able to do these things. And then the speed and acceptance of the vaccinations. Everyone talks about herd immunity. I'm not so sure that we're ever going to get to that point. I hope we do, and I hope it happens soon. But for right now, I think it's one of those phrases that we all kind of see down the road, and we don't really know what's going to happen with it. One of the other issues that we're going to have to deal with before we can resume in person is what I would say is privacy issues. We can ask people, I think, whether they've been vaccinated, but can we require it, or should we require that of them to participate in a group? Are we going to have everyone else in the group asking that? We don't know. Uh, the facility limitations are actually fairly complex. We have been able to outfit our facility to handle a small group, so we can handle with 6 foot spacing a group of, like, let's say 8 people plus a moderator, and up to 5 observers in the observation room. The problem is that we still have a ventilation system it's pretty basic. We're all going to be in there for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever the time is. So there are still fair reasons that we have not made the decision as a company to go back to in-person research. One of the things that I will spend some time on, and I think is probably as big a reason for, I don't want to say avoiding, but not jumping all in on returning to in-person, either regardless of what um, the regulations are, or the city or the state is doing, is the ability to recruit a representative group of participants, which is not the same as a sample, but within any focus group criteria, you generally will have a desire to have a mix of people. So we usually go for a 50-50 mix of gender. We try to get a representative mix of ages. We try to get a representative mix of ethnicities, and so on. And there are some barriers to that right now. We talked about the facility, and just found a couple of cartoons here. I think, the one obviously was the social distancing, that you can see right there how big of a room you need to try and do a focus group with that many people. And then one of the things we talked about was masking. Are people going to participate? So you can see this facility that we have laid out, and this is seating, like I said, that will accomplish what we would like to accomplish as far as a regular group. But we have, as we talked about, hand sanitizer, on-site compliance type issues. I will say that our last in-person group was conducted 1 year ago tomorrow, and I was at that group, and even at that time, we had 2 participants who, let's see, how should I say it nicely, felt that they didn't need to wear a mask in the group. And that's something I think we're going to have to deal with as time goes on. And I think this is probably what sums it up as much as anything. Whether we like it or not, consumers are polarized right now. We all have, I shouldn't say we all have different opinions, but there are strong feelings one way or the other about so many things, and they bleed over into what people are comfortable doing in terms of going out, and in our situation, coming to a focus group. So on the right, I wanted to share this with you. We did a couple of these surveys last year just to kind of gauge where things are. So this is one we did in August of last year, which was actually kind of after the surge. It was things had actually calmed down a little bit. And what I did is I separated out the results based on Republicans and Democrats, because it was also an election season, things were coming up. So we basically asked people, how likely are you to do each of the following things? And this is the combined percentage. It said they were very or somewhat likely to do them. And you can just go right down the list. And in every single instance, those who are identified as Republican, which equates highly with conservative, are just much more likely to take the chance, if you will, or to not be concerned and go to do these different things. So, for example, dining out at a restaurant indoors, 72% of them were willing to do that then, compared to 41% who identified as Democrats. Unfortunately, those attitudes bleed over into our ability to recruit a good mix. So I would use an example of, in fact, I just had a call today with an attorney who was interested in doing a mock jury, and we were talking about that. And a jury pool typically One of the things you ask is political philosophy or political affiliation. And when we talked about that, that usually you always try to get a balance between those who are tend to either be conservative or progressive or liberal or whatever the case may be. And partly that's because there's a lot of research out there that they tend to view defendants differently. They tend to view expert testimony of authority figures differently. So there's a lot of good reasons why we need to be able to find a good representative number of people from all walks of life, or as many as possible in most cases. Right now, I just don't feel like we can do that. But we have online options. And there are some benefits to online qualitative that really aren't just related to, hey, we can do it because we can't do it in person. Online allows us to find a lot more people, and especially from a geographical standpoint. If we have done some things for companies like, or excuse me, clients up in Reno, Nevada over the last year, we have been able to do not necessarily national-based samples, but they've been certainly more spread out than normal. Online is convenient for participants. They don't have to get in the car and fight quitting time traffic. They don't have to worry about it's raining. They're able to participate from the comfort of their home, so it's convenient for them. Offers a lot of flexibility for clients. We just, I tell the story, we just completed a series of 4 online groups for a local client, and it was via Zoom. And there were 23 client observers, which is more than we would ever fit into our viewing room. But what we did is there's a capability with Zoom, and I'm not trying to sell a Zoom platform. That just happens to be the one we use, where we were able to stream the proceedings or the group itself to a YouTube channel. And then clients were just all able to watch that. There's about a 25-second delay, but if you're just sitting there watching it from your home office, you don't care. You're able to watch. You're able to coordinate with us, and so that worked very well, and it was a very successful project. And I can tell you that those people were all over the U.S., and 2 or 3 of them were from Italy while that group was going on, and that's something. Obviously, they would have had to have traveled here in the past, unless you could use focus vision, but this is a way to do that without the added expense. It's easier to recruit a range of consumers and balance groups by demographics. One of the things that we've also adopted is pre-screening online, not just conducting the groups online. So we will, for example, now send out blast emails to our database using the screeners that we get, and that allows us to build a big pool of participants so that we can then come in and say, okay, let's choose here, and we can prioritize the people that we want to invite, rather than in the old days recruiting via telephone was, hey, we found a qualified participant, let's recruit them and move on. And it made it more difficult to get a good mix of gender and age and so on. Now we can kind of pick and choose, for the most part, who we really want to have in there. And the final, I think, benefit that I would say right now is that over this last year, this is the good news on the pandemic, over the last year, your average person, consumer, whatever you want to call them out there, has learned how to use online tools to communicate that they might not have become adept at or been willing to try if it were not for the pandemic itself. I'm going to get a little wonky here, but this is kind of give you a little bit of an outlook on some of the things that we can do, and some of the terminology that we use varies. So what we're talking about are 3 different methodologies that might approach that you might be able to use to approach a problem you might have as far as a research issue. Video chat discussion, which I would also call a video focus group. a text chat discussion, which we don't do a lot of, but is still out there and is available. So that would be done via text. And then online bulletin boards, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. There are a number of companies that provide those platforms, and we have done a number of those for different clients. And then so talking about who they're suited for, IDI just stands for individual depth interview. So that would be a one-on-one interview versus a group. So video chat is really suitable for either one of those. Text chat is usually set up more for a larger group and kind of a shorter survey. And online bulletin board can be done with small audiences or larger audiences. I've seen as many as 35 or 40 participate in an online bulletin board. And that gets us to group size. So video focus group, we say up to 10. We will talk about that a little more in depth in a few minutes. I think it depends on the topic, depends on the people, depends on the moderator's preferences, but I would say up to 10. A text chat, it's been recommended that those are limited to about 12 to maybe 15 people. And then an online bulletin board can handle a larger group of people, and for specific reasons that we'll talk about in a second. The length of these, as far as the time commitment goes for the participant, usually, as you know, a focus group lasts about 90 minutes to 2 hours. There's a lot of recommendations in our industry that we limit those to 90 minutes. That people tend to get more fatigued in a Zoom setting, as we are right now, than they do in a real in-person setting. Text chats usually take that about that much time, but they kind of go on a little slower, so that not everybody's participating at the same time. An online bulletin board is different. It's the kind of thing where you are able to, as a participant, log in at various days, weeks, or even months over time, depending on what the topic is. You might be testing a new product that you need to use for a length of time to be able to offer feedback on it. And so usually you might go 2 or 3 days without participating in that chat, and then come back on to participate, and that may, will drag out, and this just depends on the particular topic. Whether the clients can observe, seeing and hearing, and also see the people, yes, on the focus group, no on the other two. Usually the online bulletin board does not involve a video chat. I have seen a couple where there was a kind of a closing focus group after a bulletin board, but it's not typically part of that. Synchronous, just meaning, is it being conducted and observed at the same time? Yes, obviously a focus group is, and the text chat is as well. The online bulletin board is not considered synchronous, just because usually participants are allowed to kind of log in and give their opinions or feedback at times that are convenient to them within ranges. Anonymity of the participants, obviously, knowing what one person has to say, that is something about focus groups that is always one of those things. If you're in a group with 8 to 10 other people and you're expressing your opinions, you're obviously not completely anonymous, but for the most part, people don't know who the other people are as far as where they live or anything like that. Text chats and online bulletin boards are generally set up where they are anonymous. You usually do not tie specific comments back to any one participant. And then as far as being similar to what we do in-person groups, I would say the video chat or the video focus group is the one that most closely resembles what we typically do. The other two, not quite so much. So choosing the right online option, as I mentioned, I'm not a Zoom salesman. Like I said, we adopted Zoom. We've also worked on some of these other platforms, and I'm sure a lot of you use them as well. But there are a lot of them to choose from. Helping to choose which method of those that we just talked about, I wanted to kind of go through some of the things we just talked about. I'll try and go through it a little quicker. But group size, though, if you have a group of 10 to 15 people that you need to speak with, there are different things. So small group size is best for one-on-one interviews, obviously dyads and triads, which means 2 or 3 people. And obviously, if you're in a sensitive topic setting, we have one of our colleagues who's done a lot of work with individuals where it's, they're talking about personal health issues and other things. So those are obviously one-on-one interviews that are not recorded. 6 to 10 is an ideal size for focus groups and also video focus groups. I was a little skeptical when we first started doing them that we could handle as many as 10 people, but I've been pleasantly surprised. It's worked very well. I think people just like in a regular focus group, they realize it's, they know when they're talking over someone or when they should not. And it takes a little longer, but we're able to do it. And then obviously larger group is more suited for a bulletin board. Very quickly, we'll go through the time. Text chat or simple phone calls don't take very long. Usually, like I said, 30 to 90 minutes for video groups or one-on-ones, and then bulletin boards take longer. And then if you need to see and hear your participants or have that video for reporting, then usually a focus group is the way to go. We've already talked about live or real time and which ones work the best for which situation. Anonymity we've already talked about as well. And then the level of interaction is something we haven't really discussed, that the interaction between focus group participants is a lot of times more informative than anything that goes on between myself as moderator and feedback from any one individual participant. Usually it's, especially, and most of you have seen it, where someone might express an opinion and someone disagrees, and that really opens it up, and not in a combative way, but it allows for a lot of good feedback with that. And then finally, the in-depth discussion, depending on whether you want something where people are going to be, like, for example, the project we just did, it was a product testing thing. So for a week to 10 days ahead of time, we sent product had delivered product to 40 different individuals. They had a week to use the product and then joined the focus group. So we were getting real time, and also regular longer term feedback from everybody. And after going through all that, I would just say, and I speak for all of us, Stephanie, anybody else that's at WestGroup, if you have a client or you have something in your company where you say, look, we have this research thing, we want to know this, what's the best way to approach it? We absolutely will just make recommendations for you, and if it's suitable, we'll do a proposal for you. But if all you want to do is pick our brains and say, what would you do? We're certainly happy to do that anytime. I'm going to go very quickly again through, and this might be getting a little into the weeds if you're not actually a researcher, but I want to share some of the things that we've learned doing the video focus groups, and especially those, but also with depth interviews. You have to be a little more realistic on content. It does take more time to cover things online, as I think I'm proving right now. One of the things that we've learned and also been advised through some of our partner organizations is to do what we call a tech check. Make sure ahead of time that your participants have the proper video, audio, lighting, background, give advice on finding a quiet place, making sure there are no interruptions. Don't try not to do it on your phone if that's appropriate. We even did it today. I met with Anna and Taylor beforehand and made sure that my candle was working right and everything else. So we definitely recommend that as an extra step in the process. Don't go it alone. Do not try to moderate and run a Zoom by yourself. There's always a need for someone else to be there to help with things. We had the same thing happen in the groups we just did. Fortunately, we had one of our analysts there, and I was able to, despite some tech problems with my laptop, I jumped on hers and we were able to keep going. It worked really well. It's a little tougher for clients to interact with a moderator when we're doing an online group. Normally in an in-person focus group, I would typically find time to go back into the back room, say, how's it going? Do we need to follow up on anything? Is there any new topic that came to mind? That's really kind of hard to do in this situation. It's possible, but if you've got a large number of observers, assign a gatekeeper to sort of filter everything out, just much like what's going on today. And as I mentioned, limit your groups to 90 minutes or less. The Zoom fatigue is real. And if you want to have 90 minutes of content, you really need to allow 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after. So really work hard to try and keep the length down as best you can. Try to engage everybody. That's obvious. Just like with an in-person group, you'll always have some people who want to never stop talking, and there's others that never want to jump in. Moderators are trained to pull them out. Always record everything. It is almost impossible to take notes, especially compared to what a live session would be, because there's just so much going on. There are some nice tools in some of the platforms like whiteboard, polling. I personally would like to improve some of those features, but if you're not used to using those, don't just yank it out of your back pocket while you're in a group, and don't ask a moderator to all of a sudden start using polling or something if they're not used to it, because it can kind of backfire on you. 6 to 8 participants in a focus group is ideal. 10 is pushing it. This was written before I did one with 10, and it worked. So I'm kind of a little on the fence on that. I think we can handle, I would say 8 is probably an ideal size. 6 can be too few, because if you've got 1 or 2 quiet people, then you really are working hard to get people to really provide what you're looking for. We mentioned before, if you do have a large number of clients that are going to be observing, there are ways to do it. You can use a YouTube channel. You can also, with premium accounts on Zoom, I forget the name, I think it's the business account and up, where you can do this, where you can basically have 2 groups going on. But for right now, like right now, we don't have black boxes all over the screen. If we were having the discussion, if you're not using an upgraded level, you would. That's why we went to the streaming solution. Sorry for the abruptness of that, but the summary of what I'm really trying to get across here actually is that we can't really do legitimate in-person groups right now. I think online is viewed sometimes unfairly as a fallback position, when in reality, I think online offers some benefits and some advantages. And I think that we should embrace them, and just as long as we choose the correct platform to do it on, then I think everything's going to be fine. And I think you will see online groups, online one-on-one interviews, and so on continue. I don't know that even after we get back to in-person, I think what will happen is that in-person will be used for specific situations and when needed, but I think the online will still have its place. And I would say I'm going to go ahead and stop the share here, but I can offer up to ask if there were any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, there were a few questions that came through. One of them, let's keep on that topic about online results. Do you find that the online results are more reliable than in person, or the reverse?
I would say there's no difference, and also that I have no basis for seeing any difference in them. I think based on the groups we have done, I think people are just as honest. They may be a little more outgoing in an online setting than they would be in a person setting. So in that regard, it might be better. Hi, Janice.
So do you think that a hybrid approach will become popular?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things. Like we did sort of a hybrid approach in the project that I was just talking about, because we pre-screened everybody. We delivered them 4 different products to test over the span of a week to 10 days with some basic instructions, and then come on back onto the online focus group and let's talk about it. So a lot of times in a regular focus group, you're presenting them with the research question or the stimuli right then. Like if you're doing ad testing, concept testing, you're not going to send it to them ahead of time and have them watch it 50 times and then come talk about it. That's not realistic. But in cases where you've got a product or something where you want to share it with them, then I think, yeah, I think it is realistic to see that.
And now, is your own database local to Arizona or wider? And do you use your own recruiters for national recruiting?
No, our database is Arizona only and heavily in Phoenix. And no, we do not use our national, our recruiting. We don't have the capability to recruit nationally.
Okay, thank you. And I know
That was a
already
situation.
answered this question in the chat, but I'm going to ask it again in case someone didn't see it in the chat. Has transitioning to a digital methodology opened up the respondent pool to new participants such as stay-at-home moms or busy executives who couldn't traditionally participate in person? And has that been beneficial? I know you've touched on it a bit also, but if you wouldn't mind expanding on that.
Yeah, and let me correct myself a little bit. I should say we can handle national and out of Arizona recruiting, but a client list would need to be provided. So we don't have a database outside of Arizona. We can still recruit nationally or regionally as long as we have a list from a client. To go back to yours, I think, yes, I do believe it has opened up possibilities for not just those examples you gave, but also for audiences we might not be able to reach, such as younger individuals. We're finding 18 to 25-year-olds who are willing to participate in anything is just difficult. And as you know, we're able to do that. But we also, the flip side of that is there is a baseline where, especially with like lower income individuals, maybe older individuals who don't have as much tech experience, although I think that's maybe not, people like to think of a lot of older people as not knowing how to use a computer, but my experience has almost been the opposite. Like they're showing me how to do things. So I think there are limits to where you can go with this, and yeah, like I said, ultra low income, language barriers would still be a problem with trying to do online, at least unless it was set up as, for example, a bilingual group and had a bilingual moderator recruited with bilingual and so on.
Excellent. Those are the questions that I had on my list. At this point, feel free to unmute yourself and ask Dave any question that you may have.
I have a question. Dave, in terms of a hybrid solution, I'm not even sure I know exactly what I mean by that, but are people doing, like, we'll have one focus group online and we'll have one focus group in person, or maybe that's what's coming? Or is it even you have an in-person focus group with also some people online? I'm just trying to figure out, like, people saying, how can we keep getting the answers we want to get and finding out what target audiences are thinking and what's the best way to do it? Maybe we have a small focus group in person and a small focus group online.
Yeah, and I think it's very situational. So for example, by necessity, there was a large project going on when all of this hit last year, where one of our other colleagues, Wendy, was working on a number of groups, and we had to at the last minute convert the last 3 or 4 to online groups, even though they were scheduled to be in, and they were fully recruited. Everything was ready to go. 2 of them were here, 2 of them were in different cities. So the online pivot really allowed us to do those groups, and we wouldn't have been able to do them. I don't think I'm ever going to be in a position where I'm going to recommend a hybrid group, meaning some online, some in person at the same time. Just a few meetings I've been in where that's happened, that just hasn't worked real well. There's just a lot of stuttering and stumbling as far as that goes. But I also think the notion, if you go into it saying, well, we're going to do what we can in person and we're going to do the others online. So if you wanted to do groups in Phoenix, you can do them in person. You could then maybe recruit people in Flagstaff, Tucson, Yuma, whatever, to do the online ones. One of the things that you'll find is now that focus group facilities all over the country are realizing they're going to have to offer up their people, and we're not any different. Where if someone wants to do a remote group with people who live in Phoenix and they don't have a Phoenix database, we can offer up the recruiting and the people and even the platform, and their moderator just logs in just like I did and does the group, and there you have it.
Great, thanks.
I had one last one that I've recommended to a couple of clients, and this relates directly to the mock jury situation, where there's also, I think, going to be an increased use of another hybrid style of research, which would be a quantitative type thing. So we might have 100 people complete an online survey with feedback on whatever it happens to be, and then we would then maybe recruit 10 or 20 of them to participate in a follow-up online focus group based on their answers. It allows us to say, okay, that person offered a particularly intriguing insight. They get to be in the group and so on. So I think you're gonna see some of the piggyback type projects where you don't just do groups and you don't just do a survey. I think you're gonna see a little more of the melding of that since we have this capability now.
I was going to share, some of the things that's opened up. We did some of our first online pivot groups, and maybe they would have been online anyway. I don't know, even without COVID, I'm not sure. We're like teen groups, which was fun to hear about. I wasn't involved, which is a very young moderator, so they could relate to them. But,
right.
Kids they were already Zooming in school all day. So we didn't even do tech checks with that group, and they knew how to do it. And you could, now granted, they were on phones and they like to show their forehead and not follow all the rules. So I think some of this too is like, what is that? Not guerrilla research, but as much as you prepare and we've kind of gone back and forth, right, Dave? Like, do we require, like, okay, like we wanted in our recruiting to be like, okay, you have a laptop, okay, it's going to be quiet and no one's going to interrupt you. But it kind of goes out the window to some degree for those hard to reach groups, like Nat brought up, like with moms we just did. It's like, yep, babies are crying, they're nursing, okay, like
Right.
lots of things are going on in that. And with the teen groups, they were not, it doesn't matter what you said, they were doing their own thing anyway. And allowing mobile phones is somewhat of a necessity if you're trying to reach populations. Not everybody has a laptop or even an iPad. So if you want, like the kind of low income moms group we just did, like, yep, they're driving and the phone is here, or, it's kind of crazy, right? It's not quite as like pristine, like, welcome to our focus group facility, have a seat, don't bring children.
That's a good point. And what I was describing, we had a very controlled one, because when we recruited, we had a minimum household income, we had age criteria, so a limit on younger and a limit on older, so it was pretty fixed, and we were able to find, and that's again by recruiting and pre-screening online using online surveys rather than traditional phone banking. You get a big pool of people, and you ask questions like, do you have reliable high-speed internet? Do you have a place you can do this? Do you have a laptop or a desktop? And yes. So you can isolate and just focus in on recruiting those individuals who basically have that capability.
Definitely,
So
we
eliminate the problems.
screen for that. But I'm saying sometimes it's a calculated risk.
Yeah.
Like in an ideal world, right, you want everybody paying attention. But if you want to reach people who aren't the ideal people, I guess, for a business Zoom, because that's then you kind of just go with it. And moderators have to be really
and we had that
confident
happen.
and flexible. Yeah,
we had one lady who passed everything, did the tech check, did everything, and then at the last minute decided she would try and do the group from her phone on her way to Payson.
Right.
sorry, it didn't work. She just kept freezing, and we finally had to drop her. So it's never 100%.
Like in your marketing jobs, everything changes. Feels like research, it's just always changing all the time. So this is another kind of keeps us on our toes, right?
Another
No
adjustment.
resting.
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
Hey,
Anyone
Dave and
else?
Stephanie. Nate Smith here. Thanks Phoenix AMA. I really appreciate you guys hosting. Quick question for you. So you talked a lot about the video capture. How are you finding the analysis of the footage? And is it much different from, what you would normally do? Have there been challenges? I would love to hear about that.
Actually, it hasn't been that different. The only difference I've noticed as a moderator is it is more difficult. So in an in-person setting, you're still recording the proceedings, and you rely on the audio and the video to listen to after the fact and really do your analysis. But usually in a fixed setting like that, you're able to kind of make mental notes, or you might have someone observing, taking notes. We can still do that with online. And to be honest, it was kind of nice because we had the Zoom recording going, and then the stream to the YouTube channel provided a backup, which we ended up needing because the first group, we had a hiccup with the stream, with the Wi-Fi, and the Zoom recording stopped, but the YouTube kept going. So it's still a time-consuming thing to do, to go back through all the audio and the video and remind yourself of what everybody said. We also do transcriptions pretty frequently, and we did that with this. So it's, people don't realize how much work is required after a focus group is done for the moderator to go back through and summarize everything and really do a cogent report. I always tell clients that 90% of what you get as far as learning is going to be from just observing the group and listening to what they say. But if it's, and in this case, it was one of those where there were some very specific questions they wanted answered that were kind of touch and go. There was no choice but to go back through and say, okay, I remember now what that person said, and that ties in. So it's a lot of work. Yeah.
We brought up Qualboard earlier. And boy,
really,
if you want to get buried in information,
Yeah.
so much. Those are, I try not to, I'm like, who wants to write this report? No, it's great. It's pretty overwhelming. It's amazing though. If you have in-depth topics or even sensitive ones where you want people to have some anonymity and at home, and you want them to be really thoughtful, and you're not as concerned with them like interacting with other people, it's really about their experience. We kind of did this with some journey mapping. It's kind of amazing what people will share and how long they'll spend doing it, far more than if they were in a 2-hour focus group. I would say, like, they're for 3 days, they're kind of logging on at their convenience, on and off. And they literally, people like talking about themselves, as it turns out, if you didn't know. So they really will share quite a bit. I think our trouble with that is like, wow, this is like massive amounts of text to go through. And we do use some tools to keyword and to tag while we're going. But part of the art is like making sure to ask the questions in a way, where you get what you need and not too much more, and don't repeat them.
I think one of the other fun things that I've noticed is doing online groups. It's easier for me as a moderator to make an individual connection with every participant than it is in a group setting. Like right now, I mean, I've kind of got, okay, Frankie, hi Frankie, I could talk, you're going to feel like I'm talking directly to you, and so on and so forth. Whereas when you're all sitting in a group, you're kind of looking around at what other people are saying, where in this case, it's you and me, or maybe you and you. And I think people open up almost better in this kind of setting than they do when everybody's in the same room. I wish I'd have thought of that sooner. I'd do an academic paper or something. Yes.
Hi, Dave. I think one silver lining, if any, of the pandemic is that people have become Zoom savvy, and people who had never used Zoom a year ago are now quite adept at it and using it almost weekly. And so that's opened the door, I think, for a lot of our online work. And just wonder if you agree with that.
I absolutely, yeah. I think I made that point when I was going through my thing. I think that is one of the unforeseen benefits of tripping into this world is that, you know, people have no choice but to, I mean, I know that we Skyped a little bit with my granddaughter before, but I was never that heavily a Zoom or Google Meets or whatever the case may be user. Now I really rely on it. I think I try to do video whenever possible. I don't like just having my face up there.
Right.
I'd like to follow up on what Stephanie was saying about using, about many of the respondents using their phones rather than laptops or bigger screens. I think that gets in the way somewhat of interaction in an online group, and that you might find that you can maintain a connection with each individual respondent. But if people are on their phones, they're not really seeing, then it's not a big enough screen for them to really see the faces of other people in the groups. And so I think there's a loss of interaction. And if I'm in a situation where I know there's going to be a lot of telephone work, I would rather do one-on-ones or maybe dyads or something rather than a larger group, just because of the technical limitations.
I completely
found
agree. Yeah, I completely agree. I think the default needs to be like what we talked about. The default needs to be laptop, desktop, tablet at worst, phone only for special audiences.
Right.
I would say don't even, even if you've got someone who is a really good recruit, they can only do it by phone, but everybody else is not using a phone. You'd have to convince me that that's a good idea, because I
think
agree.
it-
could be
I
distracting.
agree, Dave, but with the teenagers,
That's
that's
an
their
example.
life. Like, that's a special group. That's a good example. It's
Right,
like, that's where they live. And that's how they're FaceTiming all the time. And that's just their environment. So, right, that was an exception. I mean,
That's
it was
the best you
hard.
can do with them, probably.
Well,
Right.
it's also true if you're doing a shop along or they're outside of their home and you're actually doing the interview on the fly and they're in their car and talking about the trip, or in the store talking about their experiences.
That's not
They're on their phone. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. You're right. I mean, the ideal is we would screen for, unless it was a special audience, that you just got to meet them where they are, right? Sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, anyone? Great. Well, Dave, thank you very much
Thank you
for
all for
joining us. Again, this always gets me thinking, and what's the best way to do it? And this was really great information. And I will get the presentation to everyone. And of course, everyone will get a recording as well. But Dave, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
And-
Thanks to Steph and everybody else that helped out pulling this together. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And just for everyone else that's online, and we'll have more information on the website soon, but our next event is Wednesday, March 24th at 11:30 a.m., so lunchtime. And we are having Pam Angst join us. She's actually joining us from New Jersey. She's actually from one of my hometowns, which was kind of interesting. Yeah. And my little hometown of West Milford, New Jersey. And she's going to be speaking about killer keywords, how to write content for both humans and search engines. I know I'm facing that challenge right now, and I know everybody does. So that'll be a good one. And then April 8th, Thursday, and that's a 3 o'clock time frame. We're going to have April Holly speak. Hub and Spoke meets the customer journey and SEO. So we are going to be talking about website and content and everything related to that. And that'll be another good one, and a real good follow-up to Pam's talk on March 24th. So I hope you can join us. But again, thanks to our sponsors for being with us. And Taylor, thank you again for hosting us. And if anyone needs video production, please consider giving Taylor a call. And again, we thank WestGroup Research for being a sponsor. So you just heard a lot of really great information. If you have research and marketing needs, please consider calling WestGroup Research. And if you need contact information don't hesitate to reach out to me and I can connect you with Stephanie. And then again, just thanking our supporters. We really appreciate their support in everything we do. And everyone have a great rest of your Thursday. And I hope we see you on the 24th and April 8th. And otherwise, we'll see you online some other time soon. Today, believe it or not, is the 1-year anniversary of our last in-person event. Exactly a year ago today was our last in-person event. So hopefully we're getting closer to getting to see each other again. But until then, I look forward to seeing you on Zoom, and have a great rest of your Thursday, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.